Vanessa, I think I have to, there we go. Vanessa, welcome to your own webinar where we are going to be chatting about today supplementation and immunity, which is a bit of a big deal nowadays. I'm going to do your short bio for you, and if I miss anything, please feel free to correct me, because I think that it has accumulated some content since here. So you did your BSc in nutritional medicine from Thames Valley University in London, England. You are practicing, this is where we wanted a bit of a correction, you are practicing where at the moment?
Well, so right now I'm doing my PhD in Berlin at the University of Potsdam. So I'm not practicing right at this moment, but up until this, so I was practicing in Vancouver at the BCCS Wellness Center for years, and then I was practicing in Alberta. I'd lived there for the past 5 years, and I was actually I'm also a physiotherapist. So I was doing rehab with nutritional and physiotherapy at Millard Health Center. And so, yeah, so which is a rehab center for people with chronic pain who have been injured.
Very good, and thank you. And with respect to chronic pain, what is your PhD in right now? What are you working on?
Chronic pain rehab. yeah. So right now we're working on a project with chronic lower back pain, although it's not so specific for especially, well, for the nutritional thing. Chronic pain is chronic pain, but the other part of, the physiotherapy part of rehab is different, of course.
Okay, very good. And you have taught courses at IHN at the Vancouver campus, and you are teaching, of course, the therapeutic nutrition and supplementation in practice coming up this month, actually next Friday, which is exciting. So please, wait, I do want to share something with everyone who is on. It is 5 o'clock your time, and you're happily tucked away in Berlin. And oh, we just got a comment that you're one of the best teachers.
Joanne, who said that? Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here.
I love Joanna. So I would love to get right into your gorgeous content, and let's do that.
We haven't done this format before, so bear with me if you have any technical difficulties. And of course, my teaching style is going to be a little different, because usually I make everybody dance before we do anything. I'll have to skip that for today. But let's talk about what everybody is here to talk about. And as far as the questions are concerned, I believe that the lovely Julia is going to head the Q&A after we're done, and then so we'll get to everybody's questions. So if you have something that you desperately need to ask, I suppose can people interrupt? Can people put their hands up in the middle of, or are you just collecting it to the end?
No, because this is for YouTube. We're recording, so all questions can be popped into the Q&A or chat, Vanessa, and I will see them, and we'll get to them right at the end. So as they think of them, they can pop them in.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen with you guys so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to start with the PowerPoint. Okay, and okay, everybody. So nutrition and immunity. So this is obviously a hot topic because we're all living under some manner of quarantine at the moment. And of course, the big thing with COVID is that it is a disease that no human immune system, except for the people, of course, have already gotten it. The immune system has never contacted this disease before. So how to defend against it, by optimizing the health of your immune system is sort of really the only thing that we've got. There are no other medical interventions, standard medical interventions that have been tried or proven or anything. But the beautiful thing about that is we do have an immune system, and it is designed to fight anything that could be a threat. So we're going to talk about generally how to boost the immune system. There have not been, obviously we haven't had very much experience with COVID itself, but there are some general recommendations, and there has been some recommendations from, research just on, for example, acute respiratory failure, which is the disease that's actually really harming people. That's what COVID-19 is. It's the disease that the coronavirus causes. So, and we do know from other people who have had, acute respiratory distress, have had to be ventilated and that sort of thing, that they actually have done studies on what nutritional supports help them. So we're going to just sort of talk a little bit about that in terms of this is something that, that it seems to be safe to recommend for this as well. But first thing that we need to talk about really is just the immune system itself. Is how does the immune system work? Because I mean, if you don't know how the immune system works, it wouldn't really make sense, what the role of nutrition and supplementation and whatnot is in the immune system. So the first thing is, this might be a refresher for some people, but it might be new for other people, is we have two parts to the immune system. So you have the innate immune system. And as you can see, and I can draw? Oh, I can do pen. I can draw things. So as you see, we have got the innate system is here, and the innate immune system consists of cells that are your white blood cells. So this is the first thing that we want to sort of talk about, is whenever you hear people talk about white blood cells, what they're talking about is this family of cells right here, the granulocytes, the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and the basophils. And they are non-specific. So this is sort of the big thing about the innate immune system, is that it doesn't know what it's attacking. It just knows something looks weird. Something looks not quite, just doesn't look like it should be there, but it doesn't know specifically what it is. So again, we talked about that's your white blood cells. Mast cells are the ones that they release histamine. Your dendritic cells are the ones that are, so these are super important. The dendritic cells and the macrophages are part of the gut immunity and mucosal immunity. So again, mostly nasal passages, throat, digestive system, the small intestine, large intestine, and natural killer cells, which of course most people have heard of them in connection with cancer. There's actually two types. They overlap a little bit because some of them are very specific. They can target specific cancer cells, but there's also another class of them that just look for any old type of thing that looks like cancer, basically. And then you've got your adaptive immunity. And what adaptive immunity is immunity that is very, very, very specifically targeting something. And that's where antibodies come in. So the B cells make antibodies, and the antibodies will only ever attack one thing, is the idea. And then you've also got T cells, which are quite specific. The T cells basically respond to the antibodies. So what we want to talk about for a minute is, I want to see if I can bring up a little and we're just not going to talk about complement proteins because they're complicated, but essentially they sort of stick on to, things that look like they might be dangerous, to try to direct this sort of non-specific immune response to, specifically attack this thing. But we won't talk too much about them because they're a whole nother ball game. But I do just want to bring up a whiteboard, and then we're going to just sort of draw this out a little bit as to how this system sort of differentiates. Because with the T cells, you've got two very, very, very important ones that come into immunity, especially with a lack of immunity to viruses and bacteria that should be attacked, and also autoimmunity, where you have the system is trained, but it's trained to attack yourself. It's not attracting the right thing. So let me see if I can bring up, one second, bring up a whiteboard. Okay, so I am, okay, let's see, stop share for a minute. Share screen, perfect. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my whiteboard right now. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is we're just gonna draw this out a little bit in a funny way. Okay, so here we go. We've got a B cell. Well, let's say first we have a macrophage. So first of all, pretty well everything gets contacted by the innate immune system, because the innate immune system has got to be the first thing to identify if something is a threat or not. And it's not until it gets identified that then a specific response can come up. So that kind of makes sense, right? You know, like you're not just going to attack something if you don't know what it is. You have to figure out what it is before you can attack specifically that. So let's just say we've got like a brand new virus, for example. So here we go. Evil, evil, evil COVID. Why not? And so COVID is going to go and infect a cell. Now, when cells get infected, they actually, so all cells, I should start with this part, all cells have flags. And the flag is actually what the immune system can see, and that's what identifies that cell to the immune system. So for example, if this is a liver cell, it's going to have a liver cell flag on it. You know, just like any country you go to is going to have the flag of that country. So it works very, very, very simply. So let's just say for the sake of amusement, let's just say that this is a let's say this is an epithelial cell. This is a skin cell in the nose. just for fun. Okay, so this is a skin cell in the nose, and then, you know, virus comes and infects it, and it's like, oh no. So what it will do is it will change its flags. It will say, I'm infected, and then so it'll drop, like it will drop some of its usual flags, and it will raise these new flags that say I'm infected. And then the innate immune system will notice this, because of course we always have those white blood cells that we just talked about. We always have them, and the macrophages and the dendritic cells. They're always, they're the security guards. They're just kind of walking around saying, does anything look suspicious? Okay, so then this macrophage is gonna say, okay, like somebody put up some weird flags. Okay, now I'm gonna eat this because that's how they do it. I'm gonna eat it, I'm gonna process it, and then it's gonna put these flags on. And the flags and other chemicals, so this is where immune chemicals come in, which we're going to talk about for a second, are going to attract the attention of the specific immune system. So right now this is all innate. So innate is non-specific. It's trying to identify something that you need to do something about. And then the chemicals are just basically saying, come hither, come hither. So then what we'll have is we will have some B cells and some T cells. So the B cell, again, is going to take a look at these flags and is going to, again, eat them in some way. And then it is going to manufacture the antibodies. So B cells make the antibodies, and the antibodies are supposed to stick only onto this flag. And then the B cells will call the T cells. So sorry, not the B cells, but the antibodies themselves will call the T cells. Now the T cells, we've got, remember we sort of talked about, we've got basically the killer part of the T cells, the one that just attacks. And then we also have the regulator cells. And this is where nutrition and everything really comes in. So this is we have the soldier T cell that attacks. But then we also have what's called a regulatory T cell. And what this one does is it stops this attack if this guy has misidentified one of these flags. So a regulator T cell is basically a coach being like, oh, you know, red card, you know, you weren't supposed to attack that. And essentially what it will do is any T cells, oh God, this is, I'm sorry, I'm so bad at drawing on this platform. Okay, so we have T killer and we have T reg, if you can read it. So what this guy will do is he will just say halt and stop this whole thing if this one is attacking the wrong cell. And of course the B, its job is just make antibodies. And then eventually it will also differentiate into a cell that just remembers. So it's a T memory cell. So these, again, this is a very, very, very simple overview. But the T memory cell will remember what all of this looked like and which type of antibodies to make. But the main thing that we want to pay attention to is essentially the role of these guys, these white blood cells, and the role of the killer Ts and the regulatory Ts. Because there's a couple of things that happens with new viruses, identifying them and attacking them, and also with autoimmune disease. So I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint for a minute, just because I think everybody got a pretty good idea of what how the general system functions. So I'm just going to stop this for a sec, and then let's screen share back into the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, so we were here. Perfect. So we just talked about innate and adaptive immunity, and that how this gets a bit more specific. So one of the big ways that all of these cells communicate with each other is, of course, through cytokines, which I think everybody has heard about. Now, the big thing, so what you have to remember so far is we have the white blood cells and the macrophages and the dendritic cells, so non-specific, the T cells, B cells, and within the T cells, we've got the T regulators, and the T killers are very specific. Now, how they then sort of activate and communicate with each other to attack something or not to attack it is through cytokines. And cytokines are just chemical messengers. So they'll say, you know, come hither, attack, or stop what you're doing immediately. So we have pro-inflammatory ones. And again, the inflammatory process is part of the attack. It's the attack process. The interleukins are probably the ones that are the most well studied in disease. Like interleukin 1 is really infamous in every type of autoimmune disease that involves a high degree of inflammation, diabetes, multiple sclerosis. It's very, very high in all of those. They are produced by the helper cells, the macrophages, and the dendritic cells. Histamine is, of course, part of the inflammatory process. It works to sort of disrupt the outer coating of the infected cells. That's produced by mast cells. Neutrophils make something called interferon, which stops viruses from replicating. And it generally does that by blocking the doors that they use to get into cells. Because every virus has some, it doesn't just pass right in through. There's multiple doors, like we talked about those flags. Those flags also act as doors to let things in and out. And viruses all have specific door keys. So some of them get in like through only one door they can get into. Some of them can get into multiple doors, but interferon is essentially a door jam. Prostaglandins, which I think everybody here probably knows about because they are heavily influenced by nutrition. So these are the very, very local, usually skin and sort of epithelial response that you know, causes inflammation and redness after somebody gets a cut, for example. They get some swelling, get a little bit of pus. Like that's being made by prostaglandins, which are made by T and B cells as well. And another one called tumor necrosis factor alpha, which does exactly what it sounds like it says it does. It actually is used to kill tumor cells, but at the same time, it's rather non-specific. It's systemic, and it's also heavily involved in autoimmune disease. And then we also have, so as you can see, we've got T helper cells make this. A lot of the non-specific parts of the immune system make a lot of the pro-inflammatory ones. The anti-inflammatory ones, again, the family of interleukins is huge. So some members of the family are actually anti-inflammatory and some members are pro-inflammatory, and some can switch. If you noted, I made a little asterisk by interleukin 6, because interleukin 6 is another one that is really, really, really high in a lot of autoimmune diseases, again, like inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, lupus and whatnot, but depending on something we'll mention just in a little tiny bit, it can also actually be anti-inflammatory, and we'll talk about how that can happen in just a second. Interleukin 10 is pretty universally anti-inflammatory, 27 and 3. These are made by the regulatory cells. So remember, we said the regulatory cells are the ones that say, stop, you're attacking the wrong thing. Other things are, there we go. The prostaglandins can also be anti-inflammatory. And probably everybody who's taken any nutritional course knows that omega-3 fatty acids produce prostaglandin series 3, which is anti-inflammatory. And another thing called transformative growth factor, B, which is also produced by these regulatory cells and just says, stop what you're doing, stop attacking. And then of course the other ones are the antibodies. And the antibodies, IgA is very important. It's one of the first things that's supposed to identify anything that's potentially dangerous, just as it comes in through your mouth and nose. IgG is the most commonly spread antibody, and it's the one that's most involved in food allergies. So when people have a food allergy, that's a sensitivity to a non-threatening thing. Basically this whole immune system has misread some flags is essentially what happens, because these flags on the outside of the cells that the immune system looks at to say, is this dangerous or not, they are actually not as easy to tell apart as you would think. As anybody who has, I think, actually taken a look at a set of flags for all of the countries, you do notice that actually some flags are really, really, really similar. And so it's the exact same in cells, in any type of cell. Some cells just have flags that look really, really, really similar to other flags. And so your immune system can get confused and make antibodies, against these flags, thinking that it looks like a bacteria, but really it's just a food protein or whatnot. And with the pro-inflammatory ones, so the whole point of them is basically to either act on the immune cell and say, this is where you need to go and this is what you need to do. And how the immune cells, when they are directly attacking an infected cell or something they think is an infected cell, is they'll use hydrogen peroxide. They'll just blast it with hydrogen peroxide. The hydrogen peroxide is free radical generating. And free radicals knock little holes in the cellular membrane and they destabilize it, and then the cell collapses and dies, which is why we need to avoid too many free radicals in our diets in general. The other thing, though, that some of these pro-inflammatory like cytokines can do is that they can actually tell the cell itself that is infected to self-destruct, because of course all cells have apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, and they are supposed to do this when they become too sick to function anymore, or they mutate and whatnot. And it's always something goes wrong with apoptosis. In cancer cells especially, they simply stop killing themselves when they should, or even virally infected cells. Part of the brilliance of the virus is that it tells the cell not to commit suicide. So again, these are very very clever things that viruses can do. With bacteria, of course, it would just be hydrogen peroxide. It would just wail on it. So where's all this happening in the body? Well, the innate immune system is mostly the gut, skin, lungs. So anything that has a sort of an outside component, any part of the body that touches the outside. So air is obviously going straight into your lungs. It's filtered in the lungs, but it's not like the liver, which everything is filtered somewhere else, and then the liver is nice and kind of it's a nestled organ. It's not directly contacting the outside. And the adaptive is mostly in the bone marrow. The thymus, this is where T cells get their name, T for thymus. So they are all trained in the thymus. So once you have some B cell activity and it says, okay, here's some very specific things we want you to attack, the T cells actually have to get trained to attack the right thing and not the wrong thing. And if they attack the wrong thing, again, they're supposed to self-destruct. And it's when something goes wrong with that process that you get autoimmunity. The spleen stores huge numbers of T cells in case a person gets septic, which is sort of a whole body inflammatory immune response. And of course the lymphatic system, which carries most of our immune cells around and sort of allows them to circulate and to do everything. And as you can see, IgA is the main first point of contact. So we're going to be talking a lot about the double white blood cells, macrophages, the B cells, T cells, killer and regulatory, and IgA as sort of things that nutrition has a really strong effect on. And we're coming now to the gut, actually, because the gut is the other potent mediator of this whole system. Because we have our immune cells, we have essentially how they work, how they're formed, who trains them, what their individual jobs are. So, that's essentially, how the system is built from the ground up. But the real trainer throughout life, throughout maturation and whatnot, is actually the gut. And as you can kind of see here, So these are our, yeah, so these are our actual, our actual, uh, oh God, I'm so sorry. our gut cells. It will come to me in 2 minutes. This is a goblet cell. This is one of the ones that produces the actual mucus that lines the intestines. But you have a huge number of course, probiotic bacteria living here, and right underneath the single line of epithelial cells that form the epithelial barrier, you have got the immune system. It's directly there. This is the dendritic cell. These are these are regulatory T cells. And these are not macrophages. These guys are, actually, no, I think these are macrophages as well. And they basically just hang out, and the probiotics talk to them and tell them which things to attack and which things not to attack. And so the system of immunity is actually almost completely, I wouldn't say like 100% obviously, but it's heavily modified by how the gut is doing. And all of the sort of training of the immune system throughout life is supposed to start when a person is an infant, and you actually get your initial dendritic cells, your IgA, that starts starts protecting the immune system from the mucosal point of view, from breast milk. Colostrum as well is actually very good. It has a substance in it called lactoferrin, and what lactoferrin does is actually it binds to iron, free-floating iron in the blood, and it stops infected cells or bacteria from using the iron for their own metabolism, because of course bacterial cells and virally infected cells are still cells. They're cells like a heart cell, or like a liver cell, like a brain cell. They have the same needs for oxygen and for iron and for the same nutrients. So the bacteria they heavily modulate the immune system with the metabolites that they produce, because again, these are chemicals that talk directly to the immune system, and they do form something here called, there's a molecularly associated, it's microbial associated molecular patterns, which is essentially a picture of, okay, this is what a bad bacteria looks like. This is what a virally infected cell or whatnot looks like. So if you eat it and it comes in here, you should produce some pro-inflammatory substances, to tackle it, but also don't attack these things. So most of the most important immune responses are modulated in the gut. So we want to talk then about nutrition for gut immunity with that in mind, and then also we're talking about nutrition for sort of organ immunity, if that makes a little bit of sense. So the very first things you should do is remembering that your gut is your first line of defense. So everything that comes into your body is going first to your mouth, your lungs also, but mostly your gut, and that your gut is going to mediate most of their immune response to it. So actually, shockingly, a high fiber diet is one of the key things to having a generally effective immune system. And again, we're talking about innate immunity. So innate immunity is training your immune system to respond quickly to new threats. So anything like a new pandemic. The immune system is never contacted before, so there's not going to be any antibodies. The response of the T cells is going to be considerably slower. So we need our white blood cells, and we need our IgA to help quickly identify new threats, and we need the macrophages and the dendritic cells to really be the ones who are kind of on that. And actually, they have shown that a high fiber diet, and what that means in terms of actual grammage here, is usually a minimum of 35 to up to about 75 grams of fiber a day. And ideally, it should be soluble fiber and prebiotic fiber, because soluble prebiotic fiber will preferentially feed the good bacteria, mostly the bifidobacteria, and the bifidobacteria the bifidobacteria and the lactobacillus, of course, are the main teachers to the immune system, from the gut perspective, and they really like soluble fibers. So roughage from celery, beets, carrots, that sort of thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with roughage. It has other benefits for the gut, and it helps maintain a healthy gut environment, an acidic gut and whatnot, and helps clear out obviously toxins, from ingested food and other ingested things. But the absolute best one for flat out just feeding the bacteria and helping them thrive is soluble fibers. So the ones that I can definitely recommend the most would be anything with oleosaccharides in it. So that's oatmeal. Oatmeal is one of the few, very, very, very good and very easy to get grains that I'd ever recommend for immune health, because the starch is prebiotic. It's not feeding the pathogenic bacteria as much. Garlic, shockingly enough, actually it has a huge amount of prebiotics in it, and then of course it also has antimicrobial benefits as well. And you don't really need that much, like 2 to 3 cloves per meal is more than enough. So you still be presentable to the public, even if you've eaten enough garlic to help your immune system. Chicory root is another one that's quite that's a great source of inulin, which is probably the most popular supplemental prebiotic fiber, and you can get that in coffee substitutes. So most coffee substitutes are roasted chicory root, or of course as a supplement you could take inulin as a supplement. And of course the other big one is yogurt. Yogurt or any type of lactobacillus fermented yogurt alternative. So of course we've got cashew now, we've got coconut, we've all kinds of things. Kimchi and sauerkraut are also great vegan options, and they contain about 1 billion CFUs per milliliter. So it's actually, generally speaking, you can eat probiotics a little bit better than you can take them as a supplement. That being said, the individual strains that you can get in a supplement do have specific effects. So sometimes it's fine, it's absolutely fine to supplement with them as well, but definitely make sure that you get them in the diet. You'll get more, and they tend to stay in the guts a little bit better as well if they are ingested through food. Short chain fatty acids. These are acids that actually the cells of the gut are able to use as fuel. And they also create an acidic environment, again, that's hostile to replicating viruses and bacteria. So coconut oil, ghee, and butter are generally the ones that we recommend the most. And the big don'ts are really, really, really big. The biggest one is eating concentrated sugars more than 24 grams a day. So finally, the World Health Organization about like 6 years ago finally put a number to the amount of added sugar that that they said that you should not have. Of course, there's lobbying by the grocery manufacturers for ages to not do this. But they finally put it on at 24 grams. And by concentrated sugars, we mean not just granulated sugar. We mean any concentrated sweetener. So this does include fruit juice, obviously. It includes like honey, agave syrup. Now, agave and honey don't have as much of an effect on your blood sugar, which is why they're totally tolerable for that. So if you're looking at it from the point of view of blood sugar, then there's no problem. But if you're looking at it from the point of view of gut health and the bacterial balance and the effect that will have on your immune system, that's why we'd recommend to avoid them. Manuka honey, I can feel a question coming up on this, and it would be about like the antimicrobial effects though of honey and of things like Manuka honey and whatnot. Hard to tell. Because for example, with Manuka honey, we know that it's excellent when you're using it as a rinse, for example, with bacterial sinusitis or against H. pylori for stomach ulcers. But does it actually still have an antimicrobial effect in the gut? That is a question that I do not know the answer to, and actually, I've never read any research that answers that properly. So if somebody does know some or wants to look it up, that would be great. But in the absence of a definitive yes, I would say no. Beware of, especially of gluten-free baking. Powders with guar gum, xanthan gum, and microcrystalline cellulose. So these are fillers that are used in a lot, especially in gluten-free baking, unfortunately. And but they are known to feed pathogenic bacteria. And the higher the ratio of the non-probiotics, so the not lactobacillus and not bifidobacteria, but more the Firmicutes, I can never pronounce it rightly, but the bacteroides, these are mostly, these are not immune positive bacteria, and they like these types of starches more. They like a heavy starch diet, but they also like these thickeners. And so like rice starch, really every grain except oatmeal, unfortunately, has a starch that preferentially feeds unhealthy bacteria. It's not a prebiotic. And the gums that you'll find in a lot of baked goods are also, they also feed the unhealthy bacteria, unfortunately. The other big one, beware of ice cream and milk alternatives. The big one that still uses carrageenan is Almond Dream, unfortunately, but they contain a substance called carrageenan, and carrageenan is actually used experimentally in lab animals to induce ulcerative colitis. It causes significant inflammatory damage to the guts, and should be avoided at all costs. And it's simply used because it's a very cheap and very effective thickener of foods. Like I said, Almond Dream definitely has it in it, and there are some vegan ice creams and non-vegan ice creams as well. Actually, a lot of Breyers and whatnot, they'll use carrageenan in their ice creams as a thickener, and sugar alcohols. So it's great that we have all these sugar alternatives nowadays for blood sugar balance, but unfortunately the sugar alcohols also preferentially feed unhealthy bacteria and disturb the gut flora, thus disturbing its ability to effectively manage your immune system. So these would be the things to absolutely avoid. And again, you'll see these in diabetic friendly foods for the most part, and diabetic friendly supplements, lozenges sometimes. The amount that's in lozenges, I wouldn't worry so much about because it's really quite minimal unless you're eating a lot of the lozenges. But like a diabetic chocolate bar, for example, definitely has 23, 24 grams of mannitol or so. That's enough to have a negative effect. Yeah. And what's going on next? Sorry guys, there we go. Okay, slideshow. Let's try this again. Okay, here. Perfect. There we go. And for some reason, it doesn't want to go past this. Just a moment. Let's see if I can share, if I can start from here. Okay, can everybody see? Okay, excellent. Okay, so supplements for gut immunity. I sort of had to break it down into, what are the most important ones, and because there are a lot. There's an awful lot, but we had to go with turmeric because turmeric does have significant anti-inflammatory effects. It's antimicrobial. It also does stimulate digestion in general. It helps with the secretion of stomach acid and also bile. All of these things which also keep the gut environment in the right pH. The right pH is, of course, bad for viruses and bacteria, good for the probiotics. They tend to like it a little bit lower more on the acidic side, whereas most pathogenic things like the pH to be rather a bit higher. And it's antiviral and anti-tumor. In terms of dosages, most dosages looking at turmeric have looked at not the raw powder. The raw powder has varying amounts of curcumin in it. So it tends to take around about, if I remember correctly, around about, like 10 to 25 grams of the raw powder to equal around about 1 to 2 grams of the extract, and that really depends on how the turmeric is stored. Whether it was exposed to UV light a lot, because that's that disrupts the structure of the curcumin. Whether it was exposed to lots of oxygen, whether it's old, moldy and whatnot. So you can absolutely add turmeric to all of your food, and the amount that is in most traditional Indian dishes is definitely enough to have an immune effect. And this is sort of borne out by epidemiological studies that all other things being equal, like sugar intake being equal, intake low fiber, dairy product intake, which is again also linked to cancer. If all these other things are equal, it seems that the increased amount of spices, leads to significantly lower amounts of especially bowel cancer and whatnot. But turmeric is, again, like I said, also antiviral. So that would be a good one to have. Also aloe vera. Aloe vera at the sort of traditional amount, so like 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, also reduces inflammation, regulates blood sugar. And then fiber supplements. So if you're having a really hard time getting enough fiber in the supplements that are, or sorry, in your diet, based on the sort of the things that we talked about, then you can definitely you can take inulin as a supplement. 75 grams a day, it gets to be a little bit expensive though. So like I said, I would prefer, it makes a little bit more sense to recommend people to add it to their day-to-day routine with things like oatmeal and fermented good sauerkraut, kimchi, etc. And then for the supplements, again, don't use supplements that contain the following things that we just talked about. So the things that are in a supplement form that are most likely to contain these are going to be bodybuilding supplements. So any type of meal replacement, that sort of thing. Like we said, the vegan milk alternatives, vegan ice creams, diabetic friendly or low sugar supplements you'll have to read the label for those. Okay. Okay, and it seems to be that it just does not want to move forward. So I'm going to have to move down to the next one and then I will play it from there. Okay. So we sort of divided it up for that nutrition for so now you've got the nutrition for the guts and why that is supposed to help. So now we're going to talk more about nutrition for the cells of the immune system. So the big thing with this is, okay, well, which cells are we talking about? So we're talking now about the T regulators, T killer cells, and the macrophages, microphages. So the first thing that we actually really want is high antioxidant foods. So just talking about nutrition. And I'm going to actually just bring this up really quickly. So we've got I've got a really good, this is USDA database, which is, bleh. It's not particularly it's not particularly reader friendly, unfortunately. But ORAC is a measure of how good an antioxidant is. And we sort of talked about how most of the damage that the immune system does to cells is actually done by using these cytokines and other immune chemicals to either provoke the immune system into attacking them, usually with hydrogen peroxide, or to provoke the cell into sort of self-destructing. Now, high ORAC foods, though, they can do a couple of things. So one thing is they just flat out absorb the free radical damage from the hydrogen peroxide. Like the hydrogen peroxide is effective because it produces tons of free radicals, and the free radicals act like shredders. So they shred the membrane of the cell, and then it can't sustain itself and it dies. Now the thing that is a problem with that is that we just talked about how, especially with COVID, with any type of new new entry into something that the immune system needs to fight, is that the immune response is going to be non-specific. And even when the immune system is specific, it's in the body. So there's always collateral damage. So the immune system is attacking something, it is throwing a lot of free radicals at it, and the surrounding cells and the surrounding organs that they're in are going to get damaged. And this is actually what the cytokine storm is. So people have probably heard about, the problem with, especially it was a problem with MERS, and which is a Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, which went around a bit, and it was a huge problem with SARS, actually, back in 2003, is that they provoked this massive non-specific innate immune response where tons of these cytokines were produced, and like we said, some of the cytokines cause the cells to self-destruct, and they do this with a lot of and so they were essentially the cytokines become self-toxic. They start to wreak havoc on healthy cells, and they cause acute organ failure. So high antioxidant rated foods actually will absorb the free radical damage that the immune system is doing. And they don't seem to save the virally infected cells, which is another question I could sort of feel coming, is that they tend to concentrate, and they tend to save the cells that are healthy more than the ones that are the direct target of the assault. So they basically reduce the collateral damage. So anybody who wants to have a copy of this is more than welcome. Most of the highest antioxidant rated foods are actually spices. So things like cinnamon is extremely hard. So many positive immune benefits, but things like berries, anything that's like very, very, very deeply purple, because a lot of the high antioxidant chemicals are actually also responsible for color, interestingly enough. So colorful food, just if somebody has no idea what to start with, if you just tell them to eat the most colorful things, the brightest greens, the brightest purples, the brightest blues, they generally will accidentally be also getting some of the more powerful antioxidants. And so this is really essential for protecting from the effects of things like the cytokine storm. Adequate protein is extremely important. Whey, as a matter of fact, has been shown, especially, again, I'm not sure about COVID or about other viruses, but with people infected with HIV, because all of the immune system proteins all of the immune system complements are all protein dependent, and certain types of proteins seem to be easier for the body to manufacture new immune cells out of than others, and lactoalbumin from whey is in fact one of them. So again, though, with whey, we just talked about, do have to watch out for the fillers in it, but if you can get a pure whey, especially one that has a high amount of lactoferrin, which I mentioned in the beginning, that sequesters iron away from virally infected cells, which is really good because they need iron to reproduce. So if they can't get it, then all the better. It keeps it for your own cells. And then, of course, high omega-3 and anti-inflammatory omega-6 oils. I've got, or high the short chain fatty acid oils, because those are going to feed preferentially the gut and the gut flora, and also help regulate the inflammatory response. Because again, the over response to a new infectious disease that's harmful, the cytokine storm, involves just at its absolute base, the immune system producing way too much radical, like free radical pro-inflammatory response, to this new thing, to the point that it overwhelms the body's own systems, and you have organ failure. We're looking for, do not go with synthetic vitamin A, E, or beta carotene. There's been a number of huge studies, actually. One was the Finnish male smokers study, and they used these synthetic vitamin A, E, and beta carotene, and noticed that it actually increased the risk of death from lung cancer. So again, this was a cancer study, so we can't say anything about viruses or anything from this, but what they found was, and there's been some debate as to whether or not it was purely an issue with the dosage, because the dosage was really quite high. It was about 200,000 compared to your normal supplement. You should be looking at like 9,000-ish maximum for beta carotene, and about 3,000 for vitamin A. That's about the equivalent for the conversion. It actually becomes pro-inflammatory at very, very, very high doses, but it could also be an issue with because we regularly get that much in if you just eat a lot of carrot juice, you would get about 200,000 IUs of beta carotene, and there is no such correlation. So it's entirely likely that there's something about the synthetic version as well that causes this response, the way that it's broken down and metabolized into this pro-oxidant. Inorganic forms of zinc and iron. So zinc is essential. We're going to talk about it in a second. Inorganic forms are very, very, very poorly absorbed. Iron as well can be, oh, what happened? Hang on a minute. Oh, there we go. Okay. Iron can be problematic because we just sort of said that your virally infected cells need iron too. But at the same time, your anemia is one of the biggest causes of immune deficiency and a poor response to and a poor response to new infectious agents. So one needs to be iron sufficient, but anything beyond that can potentially exacerbate an infection. So be careful with those. Inorganic forms of iron, because they're so poorly absorbed, the amounts in the supplements themselves are extremely high. Like they're high to the point that they actually damage the intestines and the liver, and they could be used by virally infected cells. So again, we just talked about doses too low or too high. Added colors, tartarazine especially, it causes the mast cells to go a little bit wonky. You tend to get allergic reactions with that, and the same with sodium benzoate is reliably connected to hives. And these tend to be in, again, candies, sweets, like any type of manufactured food. When we're looking for, oh, come on, oh, it was working. Just a moment. Okay. There we go. And then when it comes to supplements, so the absolute biggest ones is the vitamins. And we're going to break it down again. Again, there are so many things that you could recommend, but for the absolute essentials, vitamin C. Now, we talked about how the immune system uses hydrogen peroxide to attack infected cells or cancer cells or anything that the immune system doesn't like. Vitamin C increases the precision of that delivery, because again, we want it to be precision guided and not buckshot, because buckshot is going to damage our own organs that we need. This is actually part of how vitamin C helps with cancer therapy with intravenous delivery. Vitamin A is absolutely essential for maintaining the IgA, the IgA in the mucosal barrier, which is among the first things to try to start the specific specific immune reaction, which tends to bring more immune cells into it and is more effective at fighting them. And again, for dosages, we'll talk about that in a second, but it has to just be just right, not too much, not too little. And vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 activates the killer cells, which are both specific and non-specific, and they're the most effective at hunting infected cells, cancer cells, and whatnot. And the biggest thing is it activates the T regulator cells. So because we're sort of talking about immunity in general, autoimmunity is a huge problem when facing any type of infection, because you don't want the immune system to essentially get confused in the process of fighting something. And this happens. Rheumatoid fever actually can in fact cause an autoimmune disease where the immune system thinks that the heart muscle is in fact the pathogen and starts attacking the heart. The T regulatory cells, which are the ones that will identify the T cells that are fighting your own self and not just the virus, and cause them to self-destruct. So you need the T regulatory cells to activate properly to reduce the risk of autoimmune disease. And actually, another interesting thing about autoimmune disease, which we may see in research in the years to come, is that autoimmune disease tends to come up after people have been infected with something novel to them. Especially diabetes type 1 tends to activate actually after viral infection with a number of particular viruses. Minerals, zinc, you absolutely need it. It basically is the rate limiter for the speed with which you can make new immune cells, reduces the rate of lung infections by 35%. Iron, you need to be not anemic. so for that, 18 milligrams a day for women, 10 for men, absolutely maximum. Use it prophylactically, maybe not while you're infected though, just because you don't want the virally infected cells getting it. Medicinal mushrooms, I don't have a particular one to recommend. They're all great. They activate the NK killer cells as well. And N-acetylcysteine for lung glutathione. And again, this is really important with a respiratory infection, because fight is going on between the virus and your immune system, and your lungs are collateral damage. Lung glutathione is a powerful anti-inflammatory in the lungs and should help soak some of that up, and it is reliably used with chronic bronchitis. So again, this is not a specific COVID recommendation by any means. There hasn't been any studies, but there's no reason to think that it won't help at least protect your lung health, while your immune system is doing its thing. And then I did say, and don't all of the other guys that we already talked about. And so, quick spotlight on COVID, and then I think we're done, because there are actually a few specific recommendations. And here we go. Okay, and these have been recommended actually by Harvard as well. So vitamin A for its role in IgA production, 3,000 for preformed vitamin A, or 9,000 is the equivalent in beta carotene. Vitamin C, that is flat out reduces time on the ventilator. You actually need it also to make glutathione. N-acetylcysteine is a little bit faster at converting directly to glutathione, but vitamin C as well. 1 to 3 grams a day. 500 milligrams is the most you can absorb at one time. So if you're taking a supplement, there's no point in getting a 1 milligram single tablet though. Like take 500 milligrams or less, but take it multiple times throughout the day, and 1 to 3 grams a day. Vitamin D, now the key with this one is it has to be enough to bring your hydroxy vitamin D levels up to this number, 100 nanomoles per milliliter, or 14 nanograms per milliliter. And that is more than 1,000 IUs a day. Like for most people, 1,000 IUs will not actually change their levels of active vitamin D in the blood. They can maintain them, but they can't improve them. So this is where people might need to get tested. But it's a minimum of 2,000 to 10,000 a day to bring that up. And again, vitamin D, having that adequate vitamin D level reduces your upper respiratory infection rate by 12 to 75%. And zinc, also for the reasons that we said, it's the #1 rate limiter for how fast the immune system can reproduce, and the recommendations have been between 20 and 92 milligrams a day. And make sure that it's an organic source so that it's bound to a citric acid, gluconic acid, and not another mineral like an oxide, for example, to optimize the absorption. Okay, guys, and probiotics. So again, a general pan probiotic, or lots and lots of probiotic foods. Minimum about 100 milliliters a day. So those are our recommendations, and I hope that this actually helped everybody sort of piece things together a little bit more in terms of, here we go, I'm just going to stop screen sharing. In terms of things that make sense, things that are good to recommend, and we open the floor now to questions. Oh, I see a couple of them.
An amazing presentation. I will now refer to you as Vanessa Picasso, and I appreciate your whiteboard talents. That was a lot of fun. I wasn't sure where you were going there, but you even put little fangs on everybody.
Oh, they need fangs.
You are obviously loving what you do, and you're into it. It's just with such not passion, but you're you love it. There's like joy in it, which is really great.
How can anybody not love this? I mean, that's all you. How many people are we here? I think we're 49 or 46. All of you 46 people. You are also very, very passionate. I'm very, very glad to have you here. And yeah, so this was just kind of a preview as well for the course that's starting next Friday. Which is the full course where we literally talk about every supplement. So it used to be a 3 to 4 day intensive, which was really hard on everybody. We had to do a lot of dancing. Joanna remembers. I mean, the dancing is the best part, but we'll be doing it online, and it's kind of nice though because it's shorter sessions so you get a little bit more time to do your homework. And yeah, basically we talk about everything supplement related, dosages, indications, and then everything nutritionally related for, how can you get this from food? If so, what, how, what's the best way? Controversies, generally how to pick a supplement, no matter what it is. So yeah, that is starting next Friday, and it's going to be from, Julia, help me out here because I'm on Berlin time.
So yeah, 11 a.m. Eastern, Toronto, 8 Pacific, and then there's international time zones after that. I'm going to thank you again. So yes, that starts next Friday. If you want to register, they can go to the website and to the ConEd page and download the form and send it in. I cannot express how pleased we are to have you as part of the faculty at IHN. And it's the first time I've been able to hear you speak long form with the area of expertise that you are invested in. Really appreciated your time, your answers to questions, and generosity of information you share. So thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay, take care, and hopefully I'll see some of you for the big version of this starting next week.
Very good. Okay. Good night.